I'll start off with a very quick introduction about myself. I'm Samuel. I'm the co-founder of Apyhub, which focuses on simplifying API management and production of APIs and consumption of APIs, basically. And there's different tools that we work on, and I'll talk very quickly about it later. And my background is that, I've been leading product engineering teams for a very long time, mainly in EdTech space, worked on managing close to 200 plus integrations. So that gave me a very good idea on all the pain points that you see from a consumption perspective when you consume external APIs. And also, I worked a little bit in security, cloud security, and I also happen to have a PhD there. And I've been through a lot of several startup, scale-up grinds, and all of this is just to illustrate the fact that, it gave me a unique perspective into API management that this is what I'm going to share with you today. So before we start, let's look at the status quo, right? What do we have? What is happening today in terms of the different processes that we have? One of the first things that comes to mind is there's a tool for everything, right? You be it design, testing, documenting, or just publishing the APIs to external developer portals. There's a dedicated and specialized tool for all of these things. And it's great. It's good that they're very deep, very dedicated and everything. But the problem is they are not often working very well with each other. So what you end up doing is that, you start creating workarounds, manual integrations. You write scripts, basically, to integrate between one system to the other and so on. And all of this leads to inefficiencies building up in your workflows. And even though you can assume that everybody is working off the same API spec and receiving updates through some centralized governance teams, there is very little horizontal exchange between teams. Specifically functional teams. So between developers to QA, or the API designers, or the technical writers, or the product teams, and so on. So what happens as a result of this is that you end up creating functional silos. And there's no collaboration across the board, and you don't get enough feedback in time. And without this cross-functional feedback, what happens is that the development process slows down, and it creates huge delays, and also it requires rework much later in the process. Maybe things are found in QA, for example, things that could be found at an earlier phase. So this not only leads to miscommunication, but also makes it harder to deliver high-quality APIs in time. So the thing is, essentially tools that were supposed to help us, which are helping in this specific function, end up creating more problems over a period of time because they don't really communicate very well with each other. And this fragmentation of tooling basically, has a direct impact on API governance. Governance, when I say this, I don't mean specifically about compliance to specs, but I also mean that it should meet a performance standards, it should follow security protocols, and they should also, there might be legal or SLAs that your product or your organization has with your customers. And all of this, you need to make sure that your APIs are conforming to all of these things. So because of the challenge, because of the silos that exist, it also prevents effective governance strategies from being implemented across the board. The major issue that you also see is visibility. Regarding API specs, for example, that's what most of the organizations that we talk to, I've talked to hundreds of organizations over the last few years, and a lot of people focus a lot on a conformance to API specs, but they don't really necessarily have the same understanding around performance, how the APIs are actually performing in production, or the security, and so on and so forth. So this makes it really difficult to get a holistic view of the API quality. And governance teams often have to rely on patchwork, reports, or manually work to extract all of this data, to collate all of this information together to get any meaningful insights into how the API is performing. So enforcing rules, again, I don't mean at a spec level, but generally enforcing rules on best practices and all of these things also makes it very difficult. I mean, like, what should the APIs be tested for example? The quality and consistency of the API starts to suffer because of this lack of holistic oversight to ensure everything is working as intended. So poor API quality doesn't just affect the technical side, and I think, we can all agree on this. I mean, it impacts the customer experience and has a direct impact on the developer experience as well. So fragmented tooling creates gaps in API governance, which ultimately affect the entire API ecosystem of organizations. So what would this holistic API governance look like, right? So one of the things that we believe that is a way to go forward is that to ensure that modern API tooling has collaboration at the heart of it. Like, if you look at tools like, if you look at UI, UX tooling over the years, how it evolved, there was also a lot of challenges there, to create UI consistency and everything. But then you ended up with tools like Figma or Miro, for example, right? Which had collaboration at the heart of them. And if you take, for example, Figma, and I know, it might be looking like an outliner, but think about it. Changes happen live, feedback is instant, and everyone can stay aligned. Product managers, UI, UX designers, UI folks, and engineers, right? Who are building the screens eventually. And everybody has the specific capabilities within these products that can give them the right insights. So they can mock screens and the interactions and everything before they even build these things. So also, they keep track of design standards, and we should also have similar kind of an approach to APIs as well to ensure that performance security, besides the API spec documentation, API specs are conforming to the best practices, including documentation, by the way. And again, a lot of the times people mistake when I'm talking to them, I realize that they think, the spec is documented. That's enough. But in practice, when you see this, there's a lot of use cases, how you actually consume these APIs. And that is missing. And what happens is that when you don't have this a collaborative environment, there is a documentation drift, right? Your use case documentation might say something, your spec documentation will say something else, and the functioning of the APIs is assume something, it works in a different way than all of these things. So it's very important to ensure that, in a collaborative environment, all of these elements are taken care of. And second, the other key thing that you have to focus on is the reusability. And reusability across all elements of an API, right? You should be able to reuse documentation elements. You should be able to reuse specs, which OpenAPI supports, for example. You should be able to reuse test cases that you write once and are able to run it across the board, for example. So reusability obviously will help in speeding up the development process, and it ensures consistency. That your APIs are conforming to the same standards, and you update it once and it gets propagated everywhere, for example. So ultimately, the goal is to provide a flexible system that encourages collaboration and adapts to the needs of the various workflows, regardless of the methodology. Be it if you start even from a spec first, code first, it should be able to ensure consistency if you have the reusability elements in place. So as with any modern tooling that we talk about, we cannot avoid talking about Gen AI. The advancements in AI, particularly in the way it can assist and collaborate, actually, can make it a game changer for API governance. At least that's what we believe. AI shouldn't, and I think, it's proven in a lot of use cases that it shouldn't be seen just as another capability, as an add-on that can be thrown in to a set of existing capabilities, but it can actually become a core part of how you can streamline the API production, distribution, and consumption, and govern your APIs much more in a much more better, streamlined manner. So let's look at how Gen AI can actually help. So Copilot is an often a very abused word right now that everybody throws in that they have a Copilot. But we do believe that, GenAI can actually serve as a governance Copilot because it can work seamlessly across, alongside the team, to institutionalize a lot of the tribal knowledge. Today, when you think about a lot of how, besides all the documented information and everything, a lot of the information that is discussed among the team members is not really captured, not really used effectively to help institutionalize that knowledge, right? It's lost because a lot of it is in Teams, or Slack, you discuss a lot of things, and all of this information is lost, basically. So if you create a collaborative kind of an environment, you can start to institutionalize this knowledge and use GenAI to actually institutionalize this. And you can capture the best practices and enforce them consistently across your organization, and making sure that everybody is aligned. AI can also provide real-time suggestions. It can automate compliance checks. Rather than relying on manual reviews, GenAI ensures that your APIs follow performance, security, and governance standards automatically, right? It has the potential. So, the key point is that governance isn't something that you tack on after the fact, or wait for the fragmentation to occur and then start to put a governance layer on top or to centralize or streamline it. You want to use governance to avoid fragmentation in the first place. So that way, AI can actually help integrate the governance into your development, design, and testing process. The other thing is also that GenAI can make sure that, you can ensure, it ensures that you have a consistency across your organization for your API design process, and even if you're working with multiple different teams. Let me give you an example. For example, Bill was mentioning that one of the things that you face in larger organizations when you acquire different companies is that you have different standards that come through from different the companies that you acquire, right? And they might be doing some things right, and you might be doing some things right. But how do you streamline? How do you actually filter out and say, okay, how do we cannot change all of this design overnight, and that's a huge project to do that. But how do you abstract away and build some best practices that the others can continue doing what they're doing, but still following this global central policies or the best practices that you want to follow, right? So this is, again, where we think, GenAI can help. You can have your own implementation level choices, and you have the freedom to use GraphQL in some places, gRPC in some places, or REST APIs, or async APIs. But there are some global governance principles that you want to follow. And I think GenAI can translate that and apply it and help designers and the team basically apply it at the right point. And finally, GenAI is proactively, it can be, as I mentioned earlier, it can be a co-pilot, because as people are designing new things or starting new, working on improving existing APIs and everything, it can help analyzing the designs and scrutinizing it against the best practices and give real-time suggestions, right, on how to improve the design or how to make the changes in a way that they conform to the best practices that you have. So, in a way, it doesn't just AI doesn't just reduce technical debt; it prevents it by ensuring standards are enforced consistently across your organization. So let's just take an example. I just want to help you visualize. How this could work in an organization, let's say, who's building an e-commerce platform. Let's say there are API designers who come up with a schema for managing customer orders. So AI can actually actively review the design in real time and ensure that compliance with the governance policies. For example, this API might be collecting some personally identifiable information or some credit card information or whatever. And AI can suggest that, the data that you're collecting needs to be encrypted, and the PII that you're collecting should also be treated in a different way, for example. So governance is not at the spec level, but it's going beyond that on also how the data needs to be treated. So all of this, the AI can help the designers. And the product managers can actually use the same kind of approach or same tool, for example, to check if there is a business requirement, for example, that a product inventory update that needs to happen within 300 milliseconds, for example. And AI can check, monitor, connect to the if the tools, this collaborative tools can connect to the API gateways and feed the AI with this information. It can monitor all of this and synthesize the information and provide the product owners with the relevant information to say whether this conforms to their business requirements, for example. Testers can also benefit by automating the test generation and so on. Also, for example, if you want to create a new endpoint, if a designer is creating a new endpoint for account transactions, AI can flag a potential conflict that says, you already have an internal API that actually does this. Either you consolidate the API with the additional features that you might require, or you might end up creating a technical debt, for example. So all throughout this process, AI, we need to be very careful that AI is not yet at a point where it can automatically take decisions, right? So this is still assisting people because it's so important to have a human in the loop at this stage so that people still, it's still very undeterministic in some cases, and there are hallucinations. There are problems for it to understand and interpret the rules sometimes in the right way, for example. But anyway, this is something to keep in mind, that AI is not the be-all, end-all kind of a thing at this stage. So anyway, I will conclude with what we are doing with this, with all of the things that I've mentioned. At Apyhub, we have a platform that we're trying to actually follow what I've just mentioned with, to create a very collaborative environment that connects to all these different API tooling. So the idea is that you don't have to replace your existing tooling, but it can actually feed. The platform will collect all of the information or push the information. For example, you write your API documentation, we can push it to Confluence, for example, right? Or you can get your requirements or your business requirements from your existing tools, or connect to API gateways to pull in the information about the usage and process all of this through AI to provide all of these capabilities to the corresponding team members. So the other key thing that we do with Fusion is that, everything in Fusion is reusable. That means, including documentation, including API specs, including test cases, including even within an API, all the request parameters and everything, you can reuse it to compose it and reduce your API management time as much as possible. So from design to deployment, we offer the end-to-end visibility to all the stakeholders, try to get them on the same page, ensure that they collaborate, and they can keep using their existing tools, and at the same time, pull all the information and synthesize it through AI. So it helps you basically build APIs that meets the high standards that you have set for yourself, regardless of the complexity or the scale that you want to operate the APIs. So just to conclude, finally, we believe that we are entering a new era of collaborative API governance. And AI should no longer be seen as an add-on, but just natively integrated into how we build and manage APIs. And the other key thing is future of API development is about breaking down silos that exist today, the functional silos. And if you're interested to learn more and discuss about API governance and what we're doing with at Apyhub and everything, I'm more than happy to engage with you after the session, or answer the questions if you have any later. Thank you.